Good morning and welcome to FM Tech Week 2025. I'm Ed Buckley, and on behalf of the information technology community of IFMA, I want to thank each and every one of you for joining us for this unique virtual symposium. During these 5 days, we're bringing together the brightest minds in facility management technology to share insights that will transform how you think about and implement technology in your organizations. The sessions this week are a deep dive into the practical applications of cutting edge technology that you can benefit from. So the IT community has been at the forefront of facility management technology innovation for a number of years now, connecting professionals like you with the tools, resources, and expertise needed to navigate our rapidly evolving industry. If you haven't already, I encourage you to visit us at www.it.ifma.org to access our resources, connect with fellow FM professionals, and stay current on the latest FM trends throughout the year. Now, before we dive into today's presentation, I want to remind everyone that this session will be recorded and made available to our attendees on the IT community website and our YouTube channel. So now let's turn our attention to our first session that's being presented by Russell Olson. Russell is the founder and president of the ROI Consulting Group, specializing in workplace technology and IWMS solutions. He's a licensed architect in New York and New Jersey, holds a bachelor's and master's degree from the Pratt Institute, and Russell is a past vice president of IFMA's Greater New York chapter, and impressively, a 30-year adjunct professor at the Pratt Institute, teaching technology, space planning, and programming. And he's a 3-time recipient of IFMA's Distinguished Educator of the Year award. So I think we're going to have a great presentation today, and it's really all about best practices for selecting and implementing FM technology. Over to you, Russell.
All right. Thanks, Ed. And I'm going to switch to sharing. So hopefully everybody can see that now. And I have to get...
We are in.
Yeah, perfect. So I have multiple screens, so you might see my head swiveling around a lot today, but let's get this thing kicked off. So as Ed said, I've been doing this for a long time and going to share with you quite a bit of what I've encountered over the years. And with that, here we go. We'll be covering a lot of things from selecting technology through the implementation process. So a quick note on this. As I was going over some things with my team this week, somebody shared this graphic with me. So I have to make sure I give Chris Prejic, if I pronounce that correctly, some credit. But I thought this was pretty apropos because I think a lot of this has to do with communication. Not just thinking you know what's going on or thinking you know what's been agreed to, but thoroughly understanding from both sides of things, the customer side as well as on the vendor side. So going to take you through a few of these as we go and hopefully share some of the stuff that we've learned along the way. Here, I've laid out what the typical selection framework looks like. Now, as Ed said, our main focus is around workplace technology, but more specifically around IWMS. So in some cases, I may lean a little bit harder in that direction, but this should be appropriate for most technology that you're going to encounter. So this typical selection framework usually starts with figuring out what you need, figuring out what can do what you need, and then gradually narrowing that down as you go until you finally select something. At a very high level, that's what it really boils down to. I'm not going to spend a great deal of time going through this, but this will be in the deck, and it does kind of walk you through the step-by-step. But I want to focus more on the do's and don'ts when it comes to these things. So as you've probably known or see every time you read something about this, making sure that you have your organizational goals in place is critical. Making sure you have the stakeholders involved is another critical one. Some of the things that we see, though, is the stakeholders don't get involved till the very end of the project, like when you're getting ready for UAT or just before go live, and it turns into complete turmoil because they haven't been engaged in the entire process. And then you find out everything you just did for the last year or so was wrong. So this is where we say we need to get them involved very quickly up front. And also the key requirements part of it. That's one area where I have to have to stress. It's great to have your requirements defined, but it's even better if you're realistic and honest about it. One of the things we see more often than not are people that come to us with this laundry list of requirements. And when you sit down and go through them, you find that most of them were things that they found by either Googling or now ChatGPTing, if that's the correct term for it. But they basically go online and say, give me a laundry list of all of the requirements that I need for a solution. And they use that instead of having something that's really specific and tailored for them and their organization. That's where I say it has to be about you. Some of these more generic things, they might not even be applicable, or you might find out that you're running up the cost or complexity on the project because you didn't take that into consideration. And when people are responding to like an RFP and they see this laundry list, it's going to add some additional costs. It's going to drag things out a little bit longer because of the requirements and the complexities that go along with that. Couple of other key ones, making sure you get the people that are in the trenches involved. That's another area where we see managers of the departments might be consulted. But when we're doing a system selection with clients, what we like to do is talk to not only the managers, but also the people that are down in the trenches with their sleeves rolled up, actually doing the work. It's amazing how different the perspective on things can be between the two. So one area for consideration is to make sure that you're talking to those people. And then not leaving IT out of the process. We've had a few projects over the last year or two where somebody gets overzealous, runs down the path on a system selection, only to select a system and then find out that they never consulted with their internal IT team, and whatever solution they just selected doesn't pass muster with IT, or they've left out some critical security requirements or things like that. Those are the things that you need to get out in front of first. So that's typically get IT's requirements in the hands of the vendors you're considering, first and foremost, because you'd like to eliminate them before you waste a lot of time. All right. Few others. Don't think that the technology is going to magically do your job for you. Had a few meetings recently where we had to break the news to clients that they actually had to still do their jobs, that the software that they've implemented wasn't going to just magically do everything for them. So another, just being realistic about things. And last one, uh, people see these great articles that IFMA puts out about this cutting edge or even bleeding edge technology, and or somebody in senior management reads an article and says, why aren't we doing this? And everybody just immediately jumps and says, hey, we have to do this, not realizing that if they have a hard time managing Excel spreadsheets, then going for something bleeding edge is not usually the best approach. You want to make sure that you can walk before you run or sprint. Make sure that your aspirations are realistic. Okay. When it comes to evaluating the vendors, there are some great resources available through IFMA. The ITC, people putting this on today, this is one of the best places to start. IFMA Engage, there's some fantastic resources all over the world from IFMA that are very helpful. You see a lot of things that are posted on Engage where people are asking questions. I will put a caveat in there. Usually if somebody asks a question, then they're inundated with vendors responding, my system's the best. So you got to take that with a grain of salt, but there is some really good content if you can kind of filter out the noise. World Workplace is fantastic. If you are able to attend, sitting down in the vendor booths and looking at getting some demonstrations might not be the ideal place because you really can't do as deep a dive, but it is a great place to start when you're doing that initial research to get started. And lastly, firms like Gartner, Verdantix, and there's a handful of others that have come up, but that's another great area. What I will say about them, though, is just be aware. We've seen this used to be a lot of system selection work. Then when Gartner came out with their Magic Quadrant, they everybody just said, "Hey, why do I need a consultant? I'll just put out my RFP to whoever's like the top right-hand corner vendors on the quadrant." Um, Worked for a little while, but what's happened is over the past couple of years, there's been a ton of mergers and acquisitions happening in this space. If you looked at a quadrant from 5 years ago versus one today, you'll see that there's very few of the same vendors. A lot of them have changed names and ownership. A lot of them have merged. So what used to be five vendors might now only be one. So that's something else to keep in mind. And the other thing is, as I have here, there's a lot of the vendors will have things in their marketing or their websites or things like that where you have to really take it with a grain of salt. I've had some pretty funny ones in the past where I've had uh, people sit and tell me that they're IWMS solutions when they really are point solutions, or you'll see like trying to get an apples to apples, where the vendors that they're comparing are so far apart, it's ridiculous. We've had a few where clients will just go back to just Googling, show me all the IWMS solutions out there, and it runs the gamut. It's even worse if you're looking at like a CMMS solution, because the barriers of entry there are not as high. They're really, you could go from a solution that cost you about $1,000 a year to ones that cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars a year with everything in between. So it's really critical that you do get a true apples to apples comparison. Make sure that the vendors are on par with each other, that you're not looking at a solution that's just started last week. Depending on your organization, too, if you're a Fortune 500, you want to make sure you're going with a vendor that's got some stability. Want to make sure that when you are looking at vendors, you are calling their references. And this is one of those slides. I know I've got only a handful of slides, but one where I'm probably going to spend a lot more time than some of the others because there's a lot to unpack here. The few other pieces that I have, aside from the features, functionality, pricing, the apples to apples part, to dwell on that a little bit longer. I've seen things where I'll call it the ability to check a box on an RFP response. Something that everybody needs to be aware of, because I've seen some vendors do this over the years, is there's a difference between saying I do something and I do something very well and can demonstrate that. So great example would be we saw a while ago a vendor claim to have a module that I didn't know they had, didn't know existed. When we drilled into it, it was the equivalent of an Excel spreadsheet embedded into their website, web-based application. So yes, they had it. They could check the box on an RFP response and say, yes, we do this, but it's on you to ask just how well or ask them to demonstrate that. And that's where I have on the do's following the demo script. A quick explanation of this, because we've seen this happen quite a lot as well. When you go through the whole evaluation process, chances are there's going to be a couple of steps involved. This is going to tie into my first on the don'ts at the bottom. Don't torture the vendors unnecessarily. And by that, I mean, if you don't have to, don't put them through the whole RFQ, RFI, RFP, multiple rounds of demos, asking to do a pilot project stuff. Chances are you could cut some corners or you could eliminate some of the vendors right out of the gate. You don't want to include people just for the sake of including them. It's really, at the end of the day, just common decency. And it's do unto others as you want done to yourself. That's a great example, because it does take a lot of time to prepare for these things. It does. A lot of the vendors will make a lot of effort to make sure they're shown in the best light. And if there's no intention of using them, or if you decide that you want to pass, keeping them going for no other reason isn't really fair. And I do have this note here about demo prep does take more than 5 minutes. It does. We've had some RFPs where the responses to them are absolutely ludicrous when you see like a 200-page RFP and you're asking the vendor to respond within a week. And that's not an exaggeration. You do see those things occasionally. So, something to be aware of. I have this note about following the same demo script. This is one that I find critical. And my quick explanation here is if you're going to give a vendor an hour to give you a demonstration and you're expecting them to cover, let's say, three different modules as part of their offering, might be a little difficult to do. But what you want to do is make sure that you give all of the vendors a script to follow so that they're presenting the same content in the same amount of time. And why do I want that? Is because if you've got a vendor that's really strong, let's say in space management, but they're absolutely garbage when it comes to operations and maintenance, what's going to happen is if you give them an hour and you don't put up any guardrails, they're going to take about 50 minutes demonstrating their space management capabilities. And then they're going to take about 5 minutes to blast through their maintenance and operations just to show you they can do it, hoping that you don't ask any questions or don't dive into it deep enough to find out that they're horrible at it. And then they're going to have some Q&A, wrap it up, and you're done. And then after you've looked at 5, 6 different vendors, you're going to forget just how bad they were in that one particular area, and it'll help get them to the next round. That's why I say you want to make sure everybody gives the same amount of time to show each different area that they're all going to be presenting. And this one I can't even stress enough is making sure that when you put out an RFP, that you are as specific as possible. You want to give as much detail as possible. You want to give as much that you can quantify as possible as well. Just by saying something like we need space management, that's incredibly vague. And what will happen is you're going to get an array of different responses and prices, etc. But if you're really specific down to the type of space, how many square feet, exactly what you're going to be looking to get out of the solution, you're going to get much tighter responses and more accurate responses from your vendors. The recorded demos is another great one. We've had instances where vendors made promises on a demonstration, and then when we got into the live project, nobody seemed to remember the features or the promises that were made on the demos. And luckily, the client actually had a recording and was able to go back and show that this is what was promised, this was they were told, and the vendor had to make good on it. So it's a great way to cover yourself and again, keep everybody honest. Last point though, being a vendor, this is a sensitive one, ghosting the vendors, where we've had instances where you go through the whole process outline, the RFQ, the RFI, the RFP, 17 rounds of demos, all kinds of stuff, and then you hear nothing. It's great just to have a little something like, hey, the project is still live, but it's taking a little longer, or there's been some delays, or hey, we selected somebody. You might not want to offend anybody by not selecting them, but it's great for them to know so they're not keeping their hopes up or keeping you live and worrying about it. So just some common decency there goes a long way too. And sorry, I clicked ahead. So the technology stuff, this area, we do see some on-premise still, but almost everything's gone SaaS. Some of the things, though, to point out, integrations, it's almost expected now that people are going to have APIs, but you'd be surprised at what is available from an API perspective. One of the things that I recommend is knowing what type of integrations that you need or want, but understanding how your IT team expects those integrations to happen. So for instance, they might not want, and we're seeing this a lot, is everybody wants to be using RESTful APIs right now. Nobody wants to be transferring flat files. Some vendors, they are very limited in what they are able to provide, even though they do offer APIs. You want to ask a couple of additional qualifying questions there to make sure, and I saw a quick note about future proofing, but this is one of those areas. You want to make sure that you have these kind of discussions with the vendors, as well as understanding what's on their roadmap. Now, you will see every vendor who presents a roadmap has some kind of disclaimer on it So you have to understand that it's not written in stone, but at least it's good to see that there's a roadmap, that the product is going to be, there's a plan for development, there's a plan for a go forward, and everything else. Few others here, and I am picking up the pace a little because I know we are limited on time, but not buying solely based on price or a pretty interface. I've had a couple of discussions here recently, just to share with everybody, where I've had clients that have gone and just bought something because they like the way it looked without really digging into whether or not it can do what they want. And it creates nothing but problems. You've got something pretty, it might not be proven, it might not be, or might not go very deep in a particular area. So although it's nice, especially for the customer facing side of things, for it to be as pretty as possible, the user interface means something, but it's not everything. Same thing with the price, where I've seen people cut corners on the initial price. And when they look at the total cost of ownership, which I typically recommend looking at a 3 to 5 year projection on that, most people fall short because they don't look at it big picture and they'll buy something inexpensive up front, trying to keep the budget down. And in reality, they end up paying 2 to 3 times as much over the next couple of years because it was pretty short sighted. And I did make this point before about the vendor. Just because they say they do something doesn't mean they do it well. So it's your job to dig deeper and find out just how well they do the things that you're looking for. And not to dwell on this one, and we'll keep it going. The cost justification. Now, usually, if you are on the client side and you have to present to your senior management to get the approvals to spend the money to go out and buy some kind of technology solution, chances are you've got to put some kind of presentation together. Here, my recommendations, as I said on the last slide, look at a 3 to 5 year total cost of ownership calculation. Don't just look at the initial upfront. The other is making sure that whatever you're purchasing now is scalable, and that it can grow with you. If you're making the initial purchase, if you don't have an existing system that you're replacing, then sometimes you might want to save money up front, but you'll box yourself into something that's not going to grow with you as an organization. So you do want to make sure that you're not going just with something that checks the boxes at this present time, but you'll be replacing in a couple of years when you've outgrown it or doesn't work for you anymore. And then the others here, making sure you're benchmarking things. I like to tell clients if there's anything that right now today they can put a process around, document that process, put some estimates of time and cost to those things, how they work today. It's crucial because after you've gone live with an implementation, it's great to go back and look at how you're performing post-implementation versus how you're doing pre-implementation, because those are the kinds of things that senior management's going to want to see and hear. Hey, look, we implemented this, it cost us X, but now we're getting a return of 5X in savings. Those types of things are critical. And the last one here, I have to tell a funny story on this one because I had a client that was going to their management team for approvals on the spend for a new solution. And what they did was go to a couple of the vendor websites and pull down these, oh, by implementing IWMS, assuming a 10% savings on a 1 million square foot portfolio can mean like $8 billion a year in savings. I know you've all seen them. I know every vendor is guilty of having some stuff like that on their website. The biggest problem we had here was when she presented to her CFO, the CFO's response was, oh, really? How? And she thought it was blatantly obvious, but didn't have any details to back up any of these claims. When we went back to several vendors to ask where the data was behind these claims, nobody could provide it. We don't know where it came from. It's one of those urban legend type things, I think. But that's one where since we've been telling any of our clients, if at all possible, to try to document these things so that we have real solid data behind it. So that if we are asked by a client, we can give specific examples of where money was saved, how, and how much. All right. And here we go. This is the pilots and testing piece of it. I'm going to move a little bit quick quicker here because we're coming up on time and I probably got about halfway through. The one quick note that I want to make is we get asked on almost every single opportunity that we're working on that we do some kind of pilot. Sounds like a great idea, only a lot of people don't understand the level of effort that goes into actually conducting a pilot, and that it's almost the same amount of work to do the actual project. So that's like one of those people just misunderstand and think, oh, because we're doing a pilot and we're only including one building out of the 150 buildings we have, that it should be quicker, easier, less expensive. But all of the setup that goes into one building is the same that goes into setting up for the entire portfolio usually. So it's just something to consider. Um, and let's just keep going. And I think I saw a note pop up about getting copies of this. So yes, there will be copies. And yes, I will talk a little bit faster with the 4 minutes I have left. So on the implementation side of things, few notes here, just to keep in mind is making sure that when you get that final statement of work from your vendor, that it's something solid and it's got things quantified in there so you know exactly what you're getting. Occasionally, we'll see like these very vague statements of work, and all that does is just lead to tons of problems, a lot of change orders, and a lot of animosity as the projects progress. One of the key areas where we see some of that fall apart is people not understanding waterfall versus agile in terms of the delivery approach. And I've got a few slides behind this that describe it, but for the sake of time, waterfall is more or less you're asked to provide specifications for the solution. More often than not, a vendor's going to expect you to provide these specifications or give you their specification document template, which you're being asked to fill in, which more often than not, you've never seen before. You have no idea what's expected. And even worse, if you have to produce your own, but you'll produce this document, go back and forth with the vendor. Finally, you'll sign off on it once there's an understanding of what's being expected. And then the vendor disappears for a period of time working on the solution that you've just specified, only to jump out and yell surprise weeks, months later to show you what they've been building, which more often than not never matches the original expectation, which ties back to that first slide I was showing there. But there's a huge surprise because they've been off in a vacuum developing. You guys thought you explained it correctly. They thought they understood what you were asking for, and it's usually far apart. But then what happens there is, in order to correct the far apart piece of it and bring it closer together, well, you signed off on the specification document. So in order to do so, you've got to provide a change order and additional funds to correct that difference of opinion. And it just continues along that way. Whereas Agile, it's a little bit better in terms of you're going to see the sprints happening and there's iterations so that when the project progresses, you start to see things happen over time. And because you get to see it, you'll get to refine it as you go. So by the time you get to the end, there's no surprises, or very few surprises, I should say. And since I saw Ed pop up again, I know I probably am really close to time, so I'll stop talking.
Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you, Russell. That was a super informative whistle-stop tour through the do's and don'ts of selecting FM technology. I think there's a whole bunch of material there that we can talk about implementation at some point in the future. So for everybody on the audience, thoroughly recommend that you watch the recording of this so that you can pause and go back and maybe actually have this on hand while you're going through a selection and a preparation. I think the main thing that I got from that is make sure that you really do understand what you're looking for up front, so you're more likely to get it. So we do have a few questions. Those are being captured. I know we answered a couple of those, so the remainder, they're being captured. They'll be answered. The presentation will be made available, as part of the recording. That's going to come out in maybe 3 weeks' time, I think. We have a number of these to get through this week. All it really leaves me to do is to thank Russell for taking us all through that. Excellent program, and looking forward to the next one. So thank you, everybody, and we will see you a little later this afternoon. Bye now.
Okay. Thanks.